Hi, I'm Sean Nolan.
And I'm Allyson McCauley, and welcome to another special live broadcast of Animal Tracks with Sean and Allie. We're calling today's episode The Return of the Wildlife Babies. Actually, the last time we did an episode about wildlife babies, it was so popular and we got so many calls that we decided to bring back the folks from Wildlife Images, and they have a whole new batch of adorable and interesting animals to tell us about today. Well, today our special guests, as I mentioned, are from Wildlife Images in Grants Pass, and we're going to go ahead and bring on the director of Wildlife Images, Mr. Dave Sidden. He's going to come here and join us, and he can tell us a little bit about Wildlife Images.
Welcome.
How you doing?
Great. How are you?
Good to have you back.
Good to be here.
Great. Well, tell us first, before we get to any of the live animals, a little bit about Wildlife Images and the work that you do up there.
Well, Wildlife Images is a nonprofit organization, and our specialty is wildlife rehabilitation and education.
Now, what does rehabilitation mean?
Basically, we get animals in every year that have been injured or orphaned in the wild, and we do our very best to patch up any ailments they may have and train these animals to go back out into the wild. Hopefully, they'll spend the rest of their life out in the wild without any more problems with humans.
So most of the animals that you get in get re-released back into the wild.
Exactly. That's our main goal, is to get everything that we have out into the wild if at all possible. There are a number of animals every year that can't be released, and we end up keeping those and utilizing them for educational program animals.
No.
So people, the general public, can come and visit some of the animals that can't be released.
Absolutely, and if they call us in advance and make reservations, because we have tours that go through the facility, they're guided by volunteers. So we ask that they call us in advance at 476-0222, and they can make reservations, come out and see the animals.
Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and bring some of the animals on.
Yeah, you have some guests for us.
These are baby animals that you get in. About how many babies do you get in every spring?
It really will vary depending on the weather and the conditions. We sometimes will get as many as 40 animals a day
Oh
into
my
the
goodness,
facility.
40 animals a day.
This is one of the new arrivals, a little crow.
Make you hungry, Dave.
And that's a member of the corvid family, and they include crows and ravens. And they've got usually a ravenous appetite, but he's in front of the public and out in a scary place, so he may not be hungry right now. Are you hungry? You want to try that?
Want some food?
No, thank you.
I don't blame you.
I'm sure.
I don't know.
Corey's his artificial mom.
I'm not doing it the right way.
There we go. These are
He's
beautiful.
nervous.
They're one of the smartest animals there are. The crows and ravens learn things very, very quickly. Like he's learning right now, he doesn't want to eat in front of the camera.
I don't blame him. Those pellets don't look that tasty.
Yeah, he's doing fine without it for right now. He'll eat when he gets calm.
Okay, now I have a question, Dave, about the crows and the ravens. How do you tell the difference between a raven and a crow?
The easiest way is the size. It's a huge difference. The ravens are about twice the size of a crow. The beak is longer and more pronounced than a raven. Also, if you look at them in flight, the raven's tail has sort of a wedge shape, comes to a point towards the tip, and a tail of a crow is very squared off.
Is
So very
it squared off?
Very
The
squared.
crow.
Actually, I have a picture of what this little guy is going to
it's
look
just
like when he
wonderful.
gets older. If I can find it here. You can get a pretty good idea of what he'll look like. But here is on this side is a crow. And then on the other side, on the bottom of the page, is a raven. He's looking at the picture. He
Yes,
says,
he's one
hey,
of the-
that looks familiar. That looks like my mom.
He wants to see what he looks like when he grows up.
It's like looking in a mirror, isn't it, buddy? Now, how did you happen to get this crow?
Well, like most of the animals that come to Wildlife Images are brought to us by individuals that are concerned. They find them in the wild. They've been injured or knocked out of a nest, something like that. This little guy was knocked out of the nest, and a concerned family picked him up, brought him into Wildlife Images for the rehabilitation process. And that'll probably take us about 3 months, and then he'll be ready to go out on his own out in the wild.
He's pretty big already, though.
He is. They grow very, very rapidly. You can almost watch these little guys grow when they're this age.
Now, you mentioned that crows and ravens are very intelligent, and I think I've read that crows, or ravens at least, will even use some tools. Like if somebody's coming up to their nest, they'll pick up rocks and drop it down on their head. I know one of our professors over at the university talked about that happening to him, and that is certainly a sign of intelligence that they use tools. Have you had any of them at Wildlife Images do anything particularly unusual or?
They're just, I think the best test probably, we try not to be too anthropomorphic with the animals, read human characteristics into the animals. Typically the best real test to find of intelligence is the adaptability or survivability of these animals out in the wild. He's just doing it out of, he's more frightened of it than he is
Okay, sorry,
interested in
buddy.
it. But crows and ravens are found in virtually every habitat on Earth, and there's very few other birds in the world that could adapt to all these different climates and habitats. Yes.
Very adaptable. They're able to make their way wherever, which
Exactly.
certainly means that they've probably got a little intelligence going on there.
All right. Boy,
We're
he's,
going to bring in a
he's
mammal now,
really.
Allison. Would you like to see a baby raccoon?
Sure, that would be great.
Gloves there. You
That
can
would be
put
great.
on.
Now, we need to put these on, don't we?
Oh, all right.
You want to tell us why we're
Hey.
putting these on?
Well, a lot of the animals, including the raccoons, can also transmit pathogens, or there can be bacteria or all sorts of things associated with them. So whenever we handle the animals, we just take the precautionary measure of having rubber gloves with us. And especially if they have something, say, for example, they had ringworm or something that we didn't want to transfer to the other animals or ourselves, this is a good precaution.
And it also kind of helps protect the animal from us too, maybe,
Yeah.
if we had something that could
Who knows
be
what kind of
passed on
cooties you
to
may
the-
have on you.
What are you saying, Dave? Dave called me a cootie carrier.
Well, this is one of the baby raccoons.
Little baby.
We typically will get probably 15 or 20 of these little guys in the
Oh, you're
springtime.
kidding.
You know, they're always so curious. They want to check out everything. So it'll take him a while to warm up to the idea of the bottle or something. But the big, bright lights, all the movement in the studio.
Right, right.
okay,
These
you
are
get
wild
dark
animals.
there,
They're
I
not
understand.
tame animals, and that's the way we want it. We want to be able to release them back into the wild, and so it's probably good that they're a little nervous when they're out here because it means that they are not used to being around all these people.
And we try to do as little personal contact with the animals as we can, simply so that we do keep them somewhat wild. Raccoons will revert to the wild very quickly, and they really don't pose a threat to humans if they're released. If we were releasing, say, a grizzly bear or something else, it'd be a much more critical that they have that innate fear of humans and don't want to go anywhere near them. With a raccoon, they're really not going to pose a danger out there. But we still try to keep them as wild as we possibly can.
Right,
Within
right.
a few weeks, he'll be on solid foods. He'll no longer like the bottle, and we will not be handling him on a daily basis.
Now, we do want to remind you that you can call in if you have any questions, 776-6767, or if you're calling long distance, the number is 1-800-558-1993. And we actually got some calls earlier from, I think it's Ms. Ayler's class in Central Point, at Central Point Elementary. They're watching us today. And one of their questions was, should you feed wild animals?
We should at Wildlife Images because that's our job.
Right.
But the public shouldn't really. If you're feeding wildlife in your backyard or in a setting, an urban setting, you're really it's setting you up for disaster. The animals can overcome their fear of humans. They become a problem. You've heard about deer in the backyard and raccoons. People leave their cat food out in the backyard, and the little raccoons like this will think, "Oh boy, it's a free meal." And they'll tell their buddies about it, and pretty soon you have 20 raccoons in your backyard, or opossums, a lot of other animals.
And it's not
So-
good for the animal either.
No, it's not
right?
good for the
Because
animal because
then
they become human-oriented and dependent upon humans, and they can't survive in the wild when you go away. If you move or whatever, all of a sudden these animals are without that food supply. They don't have a clue how to do it in the wild.
Now,
So
but what about like songbirds in your yard and stuff? That's okay,
bird feeders
right?
and things
So,
like that. Yeah, we encourage that, in fact. Bird feeders are pretty easy. Birds really, because they're feeding on seeds in your backyard, aren't going to forget how to eat on cones and all the other things they would out in the wild. So that's really not a danger. Hummingbird feeders are another good one, bird baths, but feeding raccoons and the mammals and bigger forms of wildlife is really a bad thing to do.
Right, right. Well, great question. Be sure to call in some more of those questions to us. Now, this guy
God,
is just, how did you happen to
he's
get
starving.
this little guy?
This one, like all the others, is an orphan. Came into us, and I think somebody knocked down a log that this one was in, as I remember. And they will often nest in a hollow part of a dead tree. And so they'll knock over a big dead tree to make firewood or whatever, and next thing they know,
That
here's
killed mom.
yeah, or
so-
chases mom off. They can't find her. So
Now, if the mom does run off, will she return for the babies if you leave the area?
It really depends on the situation. Sometimes she will come back, but and it's best to leave the babies out there for a little while and give her that opportunity. But if you've watched them and say 24 hours, the mother doesn't show any sign of showing up again, it's a good time to collect them and then bring them to a facility like ours that can care for them and rehabilitate them. But in many cases, the animals, you do have to get a call to state police or Fish and Wildlife to get the authorization to move the wild animals, because you don't want to just start picking them up randomly and bringing them into a facility.
Right, right. Because if mom's the best rehabilitator, the best caregiver,
Right.
everybody, and so if at all possible, you really want them to stay with mom.
At the
don't
very best, we're just a poor surrogate mother. So, you know, the mothers in the wild are much better at it than we are. Better equipped for it, too.
I think Donna's going to come in and get the little guy.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Here you go, Donna.
There we go.
Here you go.
Oh,
Bottle
he
and-
is just.
All Okay.
Yeah, I
Should we
can
take
understand
these off
why.
or leave them on?
What do we have coming up now? Yeah.
Yeah, we have the baby screech owls coming out.
Oh, this
Really?
is another one. Another example of what can happen in situations where people are cutting firewood. This spring of the year, a lot of people will go out to get firewood, and they'll knock down trees. I was working late in the office one evening, which we all tend to do this time of year. It's with the baby animals coming in. We have to be there any given hour of the day or night. I was in there working late, about 8 o'clock in the evening. A family came in with this little box, and in the box, oh, there you go. Boy, that's yummy, just like Mom used to make.
That is.
And so they brought in this little box with 2 little fuzz balls in it, and he was only about the size of his head right now. He was that tiny, just a small little bit.
Just this big
Yes,
when you
about-
brought him in?
He'd fit inside of a ping pong ball when we got him.
Oh my
He
goodness.
didn't have his eyes open, and his brother was along with him. It was still emerging from the eggshell and was tangled in the eggshell. Yeah, you can try one. You can have one yourself
Yeah, I
if
was
you'd
going
like.
to say, these look
Yummy
pretty
snack.
good.
So the screech owls were also nest in the hollow parts of a tree. A family cut down the tree. They were sectioning up the log with a chainsaw, cut through the log, and then found these little balls of fuzz inside there. Fortunately, stopped the saw, picked them up, and rescued them, brought them in.
Now-
So, you want to try one, Alice?
Now,
Sure.
Oh, they're really
Oh,
good.
these are
Dave, I'm
nice and
amazed.
juicy.
Yeah.
how can you identify this bird? I mean, being so young. I mean,
It's difficult.
Here's a drumstick.
Primarily, it's by experience. I've just been around
My
them all my life.
gosh.
I've grown up with these guys. So you look at them after a while and think, oh, baby screech owl. But they are tough to identify. It's just a ball of
It's
fuzz with a
amazing.
couple of little eye slits. Didn't even have his eyes open.
I remember
Yeah,
studying
yeah.
birds in college, but it was always the young birds that were really hard to identify. And
It is difficult. There are actually some identification books that specialize in baby birds.
baby, really?
The color of the gape of their mouth and some of the identifying characteristics are outlined in the book.
Now I have a picture here also of what this little guy is going to look like when he gets older. This is the gray-faced screech owl, right?
Right, that's
Now
the
how do you
western
know
screech
it's
owl.
gray and not red?
We don't have the red phase in the western United States. They're only in the eastern United
I
States.
didn't know that because screech owls come in 2 different colors,
They
red
do.
and
They
gray.
can see both colors there, I
generally.
think. But this will be the gray phase screech owl. The
He's
screech
still
owls.
hungry.
Oh, yeah, he's going to eat me now. If I swallow him, I won't have to eat for a week. But the screech owls will oftentimes hunt on real flat open areas, and the highways and roads become a very flat open area for them. And we probably get several dozen of these birds in every year that have been hit by automobiles, broken wings or something like that. We've literally had people pull into wildlife images and go out and point in the grill, and there's a screech owl stuck in the grill of their car.
In the grill of the
And so we have to
car.
extract
Oh,
them
my
from the
goodness.
grill and then try to patch them up and get them
Well,
out in the wild.
this is a good time for this question. Marissa or Marisa from Keno Elementary wanted to know, if you get a bird with a broken leg or a broken wing, what materials do you use to fix it?
The best materials is a wildlife rehabilitation center, a place like us where we can do x-rays, we can set the bones, treat them, feed them, because most birds are North American natives are protected by federal and state laws. You cannot have them and rehabilitate them without the proper permits. And we have the permits to do this. So there's only maybe 2 birds or 3 in the United States that you could really keep like that.
That people, the general public is allowed
Absolutely.
to keep. So if you got in a screech owl that had a broken wing, how would you patch it up at your
Well,
clinic?
typically we palpate or feel the wing and you find where the break is. And then it's a matter of, by feel, you can align the bones, pull them, separate them, and stick them back into place. And then you immobilize that wing for a while.
But I bet a lot of these screech owls that get hit by cars, their wing won't
We get about,
recover enough.
Yeah,
50 a year, Allison,
50
on the
a
average,
year.
and we rehabilitate and put back in the wild about 40.
Oh, so
It's usually
that's
about
still a pretty
10
good
that is-
percentage.
Yeah,
It is.
it's
About
100%.
80% of what comes in, you're
Right.
able then to send back out into
Some are
the
just too
wild.
far gone, it's too
A
serious
few
an
of
injury.
them you may have to even put to sleep if the
Right.
injury is too severe.
But we have,
Unfortunately, we do have to.
it's way more than half that we put
But
back.
again,
Right.
yeah, really specialized care. So
Absolutely.
the average person who finds a bird like this in the wild or in his grill
Now
would
he's trying to eat your
For example, if someone had
difficulty taking care of
if
it,
someone
yeah.
had an owl and fed them hamburger thinking they were
Oh,
doing the right
yeah.
thing, that would kill them. This is a very specific diet
So,
that wild
so
animals
the
have.
best thing, if anybody finds an orphaned baby or an injured baby, don't give it anything, right?
Exactly. Dark cardboard box, something like that, so that the bird feels very safe and protected in there, and then transport them as quickly as you can to a qualified place to rehabilitate the
But
bird.
no milk or anything like
For
that?
example, cow's milk can kill a fawn.
Well, and
Wow.
also
Dehydrates
with
them,
birds don't feed on milk ever in their life, so they don't have the enzymes necessary to digest that
Birds
material.
feed on milk.
That
So-
is- This is just about one of the cutest things
Isn't
I
that,
have
isn't
ever
he?
seen.
He keeps
See that?
facing you because you're talking, so
Yeah.
it's hard to get him to look
He
to the
looks like
camera.
a-
I know.
He looks like a
I've been
Dr. Seuss
turning him
character.
around like
Of
this.
his
He thinks
boss?
he's on a merry-go wheel,
Oh,
merry-go-round
just-
or something.
Just beautiful.
Just to try and get
Just
a
really,
better look at
really
him. He
incredible.
is just adorable. All
Now,
righty.
we're going to also encourage you to phone in some of your questions. For those of you that just tuned in, you can call us here at the studio, and we will try and answer your questions on the air. Our phone number here is 776-6767, and if you are out of, again, the Ashland or Medford area, you can call us at 1-800-558-1993.
Now I bet most of the people watching can figure out what kind of animal this is. If they can't, they probably spent too much time watching television,
Yes.
not enough time out in their yard. This is a little squirrel baby.
It is.
This is actually a pretty, how old
Is.
would you say this squirrel is?
Oh, this one's probably about a month and a half now.
Wow.
Silver gray squirrel, common to this area,
Very,
and
I've
very
seen-
hungry. You can see he's just going through the
Yeah,
snow
he
pretty
wasn't
quick
too
there.
affected at all by
Yeah,
coming
it's
out
like
here
not
in
a
the middle of
problem.
all these lights
Not a
and
problem.
everything. He just went right to business.
Food is very important to little squirrels.
And they eat pretty often when they're
Oh, yeah, he
babies,
does.
don't they?
He eats like I do.
Oh,
Look at
did
that.
you
He's getting it
choke
everywhere.
yourself, little guy?
Ooh, ow. It'll take a minute to cool off here.
You went right down the wrong
Yeah.
little tube there, didn't
Well,
you?
these little squirrels are really pretty easy to raise. They do take to the milk and formulas pretty tenaciously, and
Well, and also, don't they sleep through the night?
they do
Which
pretty
is
quickly.
unlike some of the animals that you get in, which you have to get up, I'm sure, and feed regularly
Wow, yeah.
through the night, which is
Exactly.
lots of fun. But for these, you can feed them, what, every couple of hours, and then they'll sleep through the rest of the night?
Usually, and also the squirrels, taming them is not a real problem with them. You can raise them by hand at this age. They just love people. But it's sort of like turning on a switch. At one point, all of a sudden, they turn wild. And I mean, they are extremely wild. They don't want anything to do with humans. Just
Sean would know a little bit about
Yes,
that, wouldn't he?
yes.
I had a baby squirrel that I was rehabilitating at one point, and I had to leave town, and I left the squirrel with Sean to take care of. And that switch turned on, I guess,
During
while
the
I
time-
was gone.
Yes.
Sean, I came back to Sean saying, I have the satanic squirrel in my house trying to eat me alive,
I had
which is
psycho
good
squirrel.
because it makes it so
He
much
was
easier
running
to
around.
release them back into the wild.
it really does. Yeah, it makes it real easy to go out in the wild again.
Now, if, suppose somebody was chopping down a tree, which I'm sure is what happens for you to get a lot of these baby squirrels, and there was a squirrel nest in the tree, and but the mom, they know the mom is still okay, is it possible to, is the best thing just to leave them alone and they'll kind of relocate the babies themselves, or should you try to take the squirrels and put them in another tree, or?
No, it's best to leave them with mom. She'll usually relocate them. She'll find another nest. They often will build a nest out of sticks and things like that, so they don't really necessarily need the hollows of a tree to nest in. So she could build up another nest and take these little guys
And
off
so
into
maybe
it.
the best thing you could do is if you have a cat, just keep your cat inside and away from,
Yeah, this unfortunately, this is a time of the year where cats, domesticated cats, do more damage than any other time. Probably about 30% of the baby birds that come into our facility this time of year are
There's a little
because of
tail.
cats.
It's their new
And
growth.
cats, they have such virulent bacteria in their saliva.
Virulent, strong.
Yeah, very strong saliva. A lot of bacteria involved. The infections subsequent to the bite is usually fatal with a baby
Can't get
bird. So
enough
it's
of
very,
that
very
stuff.
hard to cure them after a cat's got
yeah, I know, I've read that you can,
Squirt too
some
hard there.
scientists and veterinarians call it almost biological warfare, a cat bite, because their teeth are so sharp, and even if the animal doesn't look like it's very injured, they got that puncture wound down there with all that bacteria
Yep.
in there, and sometimes they can look perfectly healthy, and then the next day they're dead.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Well, let us ask you, we got another
Better than
question
Allison's,
from
huh?
Ms.
Yeah, I
Ayler's
know.
class at Central Point Elementary, and they wanted to know what your training is. How did you get your training? What is your background to be doing this kind of work?
I grew up in this sort of background. My father was working with wildlife my entire life. He filmed for Disney and a lot of that. He was a filmmaker
Yes.
and a writer. And so I grew up with eagles and everything you can imagine in my backyard. And then when I got out of school, I sort of ran away to the circus. I went and worked
Joined
at
the
SeaWorld.
circus?
Yeah, I worked at
wow.
SeaWorld
Yeah.
in San Diego where
That's a good place to get some training working with
it
animals.
was. So, real life training. I worked with the birds first there with the waterfowl. and started off with a couple of ducks, and then it became the second largest waterfowl collection in the world. Then I moved from the aviculture department to training, where I trained killer whales and dolphins and sea lions, performed in the shows there
So
for
you've
6 years.
actually touched Shamu, huh?
Yeah, and Shamu touched me
Wow.
back several times. Yes.
Shamu
Now,
kinda
here's
decides,
another
you know,
question that is a great question for us to address. Wesley at Peterson Elementary wants to
Oops,
know,
little,
why
tumor
won't a mother bird come back if a human touches a baby?
That's an old wives' tale. It's important to address that because a mother bird will come back and
So
take
that's
care
not
of the youngster.
true. They will actually come back.
Absolutely. Human scent. Birds, most birds, especially songbirds, have really no scent or no sense of smell. So they really can't detect a human smell. So that's an old wives' tale. If you can find the nest the bird came out of, put it back by all means. It's the best
So
thing
you
can
don't
possibly
have to
do.
worry about
Finish
touching the
that
nest
off
or
there.
anything like that.
How
I've
you
even
doing, buddy?
read before, if the nest is destroyed, but the mother's
You gonna
around,
jump on
you
me?
can put the babies in a shoebox or something and put it up in a bush or up in the tree,
Right.
and mom will definitely come back as long as the mom's
hey, thank
alive
you.
and take care of the baby. And also, if you see a baby hopping around on the ground that has some tail feathers on it and a pretty good start of feathers, it may just be learning to fly, right? And you
Exactly.
should, and the parents will continue to feed it while it's learning to fly.
Yeah, they're just branchers at that age, so it's important to leave them out there. But again, contain your cat if you have a cat or a dog because they think they're, edibles.
Okay, let's do another question here from Glendy Hale. Jennifer wanted to know, how can you tell if an animal has rabies?
In many cases, there are only very few animals that carry rabies, so we're very careful with around certain species. The canines, any of the dog family you have to be careful with. They can be vaccinated against rabies so that we make sure that they do not have rabies. Skunks can sometimes carry rabies and bats. So if we're dealing with species specifically that are known to carry rabies, if you see any signs of illness, matter collecting around the eyes, some of the signs that would warn you this animal's not in good health, we will isolate it completely from human contact
Donna.
or any
Donna's
contact
bringing
with
you
the other
fun.
animals.
Oh.
And then we really don't expose ourselves to it. So it's a real scary disease. And fortunately, the vaccinations that have been used recently and everything have eliminated most of it. We don't see it very often. But maybe once every 3 or 4 years, we'll see a case. So we've got to be very careful.
Right.
And if we have any doubt, if an animal comes in and dies, we have to take samples of that animal, send them to
Send it
the
away.
vet office.
And
to
for somebody
protect.
in the general public, maybe the best sign that an animal is sick is if it lets you walk right up to it. So
Right.
if you see like a bat sitting on the ground out in the middle of the day and it lets you come right up to it, probably it's best just to leave that bat alone and call somebody who knows what
Or
to
an
do.
animal that's
Did you want some
growling
more
or
there?
convulsing and has foam collected around the mouth, all these things are signs that it could be rabies. So stay away. If you don't have any idea what's going on with the animal, don't get involved. Stay away and let the professionals.
All righty, well, we've got Sean being surrogate dad over here. An absolutely adorable baby.
Yeah, we have 9
Beautiful.
fawns right now.
Just
Orphan
beautiful.
fawns, yes we do.
Yeah, the fawns are a real situation this time of year because a lot of people are trying to do good
Gonna
things in the
finish that
wild.
off there.
And they will be out hiking, they'll see a little fawn laying down in the field and think, oh, the poor thing's orphaned, they'll pick it up and haul it into us. Wrong, don't do that. You see the fawn out in the wild, typically what's happened, mother has bedded them down, they do not have any scent, so they do not attract predators. And she's out browsing somewhere and will come back in a few hours. So if you see them out in the wild, laying down in the grass or something, leave them
Leave
there.
them alone.
Yes, don't
And
pick them
that's
up.
why they have that coloring on them too, right, Corey?
That dapple
Absolutely.
coloring is they'll go under bushes, they'll go into trees, and they just blend perfectly with their surroundings. And since they don't have a scent for the first few days, predators don't locate them.
So if you're walking along and you stumble upon a little fawn that's sitting there under a bush
It
or
is not
something, just
abandoned.
back away and
Back
just
out,
leave
leave
it.
it alone. They also, people will bring them in and think, oh, well, I'll raise it, and they'll try to give them cow's milk. That'll kill them. And also, if they're licking your hands, the bacteria off your hands will give them scours, and they'll no longer be able to digest the proper formula, and that will kill them as well. So they're very, very frail at this age. You have to care for them very specially. So we encourage people, leave them out there if they can.
Unless, maybe the only exception would be
If you know the mother's dead.
Right, if you saw the mother get hit by a car or
Right.
something like that.
You know,
But
then
then
you would
even in
know.
that case, you need to call state police or Fish and Wildlife, report that, hey, I found an injured fawn or orphan fawn, and I'm going to transport it because it is illegal to pick them up and bring them in.
Oh, so if you
Without proper,
got stopped for
authorization.
speeding or something and you had this little
That's
animal
right.
I'm
in your
amazed
possession.
at just how small she is. It's a female, is that right? Did you say?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a female. She is just, she's
Tiny.
They're very tiny.
And they get to be so large. What is the full adult
Well, and the
size?
deer in this area is tiny. It's
Yeah,
a
it is.
subspecies of mule deer called the blacktail, and they're petite compared to a lot of the
Oh.
the bigger subspecies of deer. So we got some more coming.
That is an adorable little.
You know,
Amazing.
we can raise them,
Years. How you
Allison,
doing, boy?
and do a good job, but we can't teach them the same things a mother teaches
Right.
them. So that's kind of a shame when we get orphans that should stay in the
Right, right.
wild, because we can't teach them to be afraid of certain predators or what to eat in the wild and what not to eat.
Yeah,
so
the browse they normally would have in the wild, we can't supply usually.
we can't go out and teach
Thought
them
she was
certain
going to start,
things, so we
you know,
can never
grabbing
do the
hold of
same
me
job
there,
as the
and,
mother,
you know,
never as
I
good.
couldn't.
Sure,
Just
sure.
amazing. Well, yeah, Allison,
Well,
I'm
some-
pretty lucky. I get to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are. I wish I was on that side. And the little fawn is
She's
wandering around the studio
She is.
now,
She's
looking for
beautiful.
something to browse.
Yep.
There she goes. She's corralled here. Let's look and see what some of these questions are
Oh,
here. Okay,
want
Nick
some more
at
of that? Is that what
Highland
you're
wanted to
looking
know,
for?
do all squirrels have that switch that turns them wild, or that kind of biological
Okay.
clock that goes on?
I'm sorry,
I think
my
most
fawn
of
out
the
of
native
control.
squirrels in this area, I know we've got fox
more?
squirrels, which are an introduced species, which shouldn't even be in this area,
Oh.
do that, and the gray squirrels do. Ground squirrels, to some degree, probably do the exact same thing. But I think, you know, chipmunks and some of the other squirrels, I haven't seen them turn as wild. So I'd say the average squirrel does, but some of them probably do not.
You get an occasional one that's kind of just
stays
off
pretty
the
tame,
regular behavior and stay, you know, people friendly, but it's unusual. It's very unusual.
Most of them won't. Okay, this is a good question from Justin at Glendy Hale. He wants to know, how do you know that a bird has no sense of smell?
Because my mom told me. No, basically through studies they can examine the brains, and there's a olfactory sense and a receptor in the brain that is very, very small, almost non-existent in small songbirds. Turkey vultures, for example, are the other end of the
They-
spectrum.
right,
The
they have a
olfactory
great sense of
center for the
smell.
brain is really enlarged, and they have a great sense of smell. And of course, when you feed on seeds, it's not like you're going to be sniffing for seeds out there.
Where are
Where
they?
a turkey vulture, you know, that unique aroma of roadkill, you can pick that up.
Dead,
some-
stinking, rotting carcasses. Yeah, now a
Absolutely.
turkey vulture
Wonderful
actually can smell that from miles away,
They
can't
can.
they?
They can.
And can't a kiwi, the little birds that live in Australia
New Zealand.
and New Zealand,
Yeah, they go
have a
along-
really good sense of smell.
Yeah,
don't
it
they?
rivals the turkey vulture. They would go along the lawn and they could sniff earthworm down below the soil.
So there are some that can actually smell amazingly well.
Mm-hmm.
I think wasn't it in Jurassic Park that they said that they talked about
Oh, yeah,
one of the
that's
animals
Tyrannosaurus Rex.
having a
Yes.
sense of
Large
smell, and he said
olfactory.
rivals the
Yes.
turkey vulture. So we know what we're talking about there.
That's right, boy.
All righty. Gabby at Glendy Hale, we've talked about this a little bit already, wants to know, can a deer be a pet?
No, they're really not designed to be a pet. They don't make a good pet. Sooner or later, they're going to get big and they can become dangerous. There's certain deer we've had, even if an adult deer comes into us with a broken leg or something, we really can't do much for them. They get so wild and so panicked from
so
everything
afraid.
that they just beat you to death. So no, they're an awful thought for a pet. I wouldn't even consider one.
Well, and they're also not going to give you the kind of love and affection that you get from Rover or
No.
from your kitty cat or something like that.
You want a good pet, a dog or a cat, it's about as good as it gets.
All right,
Well,
here's
she is
another
frisky.
question, and then we'll maybe move on to our next animal here.
Okay.
Marcus from Allendale Elementary wants to know, what happens if a mother returns and the
take
baby
her,
is
Donna?
gone?
Well, the mothers and, you know, wild animals have to adapt. They can't sit around and mope and worry about their young being gone. Their strategy is, well, okay, well, there'll be another bunch of babies next year to deal with, so off they go. So they'll walk away and forget about them pretty quickly.
Get this.
How was that?
That was incredible.
Are you nice and covered
Excuse
with...
me, people, I'm getting ready for the next.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about stinking now since fawns don't have any smell.
Oh, I know.
So let me ask one more question before we bring the next animal on here. Shirley at Rogue River Elementary wants to know about how many animals does your shelter deal with per year? Gosh,
on
I
a-
would think that'd be
On
lot.
a busy year, as many as 2,500 animals.
2,500.
So
So
we'll-
2,500
500
animals, either babies or adults that have been injured, come through your facility.
Wow.
Yes,
and
on a
and
real
you
busy year.
take care of them all by yourself.
Exactly.
All just
And
by
all of what we do is at no charge to the public. So we absorb all the expenses of the veterinary care, the medicine, the food, the staff it takes to get these animals rehabilitated, and the time it takes to get them out in the wild. And so we don't charge anybody for our tours. We don't charge anybody for our rehabilitation efforts. So we survive by individual donations.
So I'm sure you would welcome donations from the general public. Maybe if a
Absolutely.
class wants to have a project to raise some money for wildlife images, they would really appreciate that. And also, don't you have an adopt an animal
We
program?
do indeed. So they can adopt
They
animals.
don't get to bring it home, but
No.
they tell us how that works.
Well, they can support their animal. They get a nice photograph and a certificate saying which animal they've adopted and thanking them for their adoption. And they come out on a tour and see the animal.
And then the money that they give you goes to help feed not just that animal, but all the animals you have and help with their care and everything.
Exactly right.
Oh
We
my
have
goodness,
Oh.
look at these animals.
These are
These are sweet
kind of
little
neat. We don't
animals.
see them very often. These are
Here you go.
baby
Okay,
gray foxes.
thank
You'll have
you.
to kind of hang on to them because they can really
They
motor.
can shoot
These little guys.
quickly away.
Baby foxes.
Aren't they neat?
They are
They're
so
such shy,
The baby
timid little guys.
fox.
Now the gray foxes are really unique. They are the most arboreal, most
just
climbing of
incredible.
all the canines.
Whoa,
They can
Pete.
climb trees like a cat.
Really?
They tend to wrap their paws around it. They got sharp little claws,
okay.
and they can go up the
okay.
trunk of a tree like nobody's business.
can
And they
hide
do
there.
that
Okay.
because they can utilize a resource found up in the trees, bird nests.
Oh.
They get the eggs and the birds and that sort of thing. And that's all right. He won't
Now,
get
this
you.
is kind of a sad story because someone did dig these fox kits out of a den.
Oh, no.
And they were playing with some kids in a family home for about a month.
Oh, which is
So,
not
really
good.
not
It's kind of a
good.
sad story because they should be with their mother, and
Yeah,
we
it-
have them.
And seeing, I think, wild animals, especially baby animals, it's really, you might think that it'd be really neat to play with or keep them as pets, but they require so much specialized care, and a lot of times their health is really affected when you take a very young or baby animal, and they don't manage to survive.
Right.
And
And they miss their mother. I mean, they need that
Exactly. Yeah.
closeness at this age. So
Well, and
we're-
these guys need to learn how to hunt and how to forage for their food and what kind of foods to eat. And so there's a lot of things that we are not going to be able to give them in captivity. And unfortunately, these little guys came into human contact at such an early age and for such a long period of time, they're hopelessly imprinted. So they're not
so
likely
they
they'll
can't
ever
be-
be able to go out in the wild again. So they'll probably be part of our educational outreach program. Go to schools and community events and things and let the public see them up close and learn more about the gray foxes. They are neat little critters to have around.
They are.
They're
Beautiful.
primarily nocturnal. They're busy at the night, during the nighttime hours, so people don't see them that often out in the wild. They're very elusive.
You see those big
they're very
eyes.
small even when they're an adult. They're only about 5 pounds.
Yeah, actually, I have a
They're very
picture
small,
of them. I
petite.
mean, most of you know what a fox looks
incredible.
like, but still, they're really a striking animal to see when they get a little older. Up here in the top here, we have a picture of what it will look like.
Very, very,
Yeah, when he gets
very
That
long,
looks
bushy
scary,
tail.
huh?
Of
Yes.
what the common gray fox looks like, and they're really an amazing animal. And again, an animal that most people don't even know is around because they are
very
active at
nocturnal.
night and they're
They're
so
very
shy and
Absolutely.
probably if you were able to have x-ray glasses, I've always wanted to do this, have
Yeah.
special x-ray glasses that would let me walk through the woods and see all the animals I might be walking right by that I have no idea
Well, you
are
know,
even there.
there's an opportunity to do that now. Corey has started, she's our educational ambassador at Wildlife Images, and we've started to do overnight programs for children at Wildlife Images.
Ooh.
So
called
school
it-
groups can come out
Yeah.
and spend the
a
night there,
great
and part of it is
idea.
like a starlight safari. You walk through the compound and see what the bears are doing, the wolves are doing, and many of the animals are doing at night.
Oh, and see how much more active they are, maybe,
It's
because a lot of times
completely
when you go
different.
during the day, they're just
Completely
sleeping.
different. They're
and-
sleeping. The
Well, yeah,
wolves
you
are
get
howling at
to
night.
experience the animal sounds and smells and tracks, and you're seeing it like a wild animal would see
there we
the
go.
area.
It's moving.
So it's a really unique opportunity. We have wildlife films and presentations, and we do all sorts of
We call it
educational.
Hoots, Howls, and Growls.
Hoots, howls, and
And
growls. That's a
growls.
great.
Starting in September, we're going to be offering it to schools all over Jackson and
that's
Josephine
great.
County and Portland. And
Well, you can
That'll
hear
be
they're
great.
making almost a little squeaking
They do.
sound or something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't know
Oh,
if you can catch
hey.
that on the mic, but when he or she ran over here a minute ago, I heard that little squeaking sound.
Okay, well,
now,
that's
beautiful.
Nicole and Natasha
Oh.
from Keno Elementary wanted to
Can
know,
you get 'em both there?
if you find a baby
That's a
deer in the
handful.
wild or an animal in the wild, how do they get in contact with Wildlife Images?
Well, they can contact us by telephone
Mm-hmm.
at 476-0222, and that's area code 541.
And you're in the telephone book.
We're in the
right?
phone book. You can
Under
call the
wildlife.
state police, Fish and Wildlife. All of them will know where we are. They'll give you a
And we
reference.
also, at the end of the program, we'll be putting up the web address for
Absolutely.
Wildlife Images, and so that probably wouldn't be the best way if they have an animal they need to get to you immediately. But
Exactly.
if you want to learn more about the Adopt an Animal program or these Hoots, Howls, and Growls overnight programs and things like that, maybe checking on the your website, which is just a wildlifeimages.org,
Absolutely.
would be
I was gonna
the
eat
best
that.
Now I'm gonna
bet.
move down again. Here,
Yeah.
we're bringing out something bigger.
You're not going to leave me
Yeah, I
to
was
snack
gonna,
on?
yeah, we were gonna eat that there.
Okay, let's ask a couple other questions here. Jared at Glendy Hale wants to know, how do you tell what kind of bird it is? Now, you mentioned that, you answered this a little bit already. You said you kind of know from
Yeah.
experience a lot of times.
Most of us have just been doing or interacting with these wild animals for a long, long time. There's certain characteristics. You know, owls have certain foot design, they have certain size, certain look to them. And in most cases, it's kind of a subjective. You look at it and think, well, it looks like this and that, or you've seen it before.
seen it somewhere before.
But again, there are books you can key out baby animals with, baby birds and all that, because there's a lot of little songbirds that really are hard to identify.
I was
when
going to
they're
ask
tiny.
you, do you still get birds in though that you can't recognize? You
Oh,
have
yeah.
to kind of wait till they just get a little bit older and
Absolutely.
they start having certain kinds of feathers coming in and things like that you can tell. Joanna from Cole, I think it's Cole, wants to know how long a gray fox can be, either how long it can live or maybe how long it is. Can you show us about how
Yeah,
big
when
it
they're
would
full
be?
grown, they're only about that long.
Oh,
they're
they're
not
pretty
real
small.
long.
Not that big
Yeah,
at
well, that's
all.
including their tail. They're not very big.
Whoa.
So 5-6 pounds. They're a pretty small little fox when they're full
And
grown.
about how long could they live, do you know?
Probably early teens, I would suspect, somewhere
Maybe
in there.
11, 12,
Yeah.
something like that. Okay, let's get one more question here.
Yeah.
Tiffany from Glendy Hale wants to know, if the mother deer is dead, will another mother deer come and take care of them?
Sometimes. It really depends. If there's a mother deer in the area, she may adopt the
Really?
youngster and take off with them. And
Just a
it
wild
happens.
deer? Now, I knew you sometimes use that at Wildlife Images. Do you have a surrogate mom, or
We don't have a
some
surrogate for a
animals?
deer. Deers are so difficult to maintain properly and keep them. A surrogate mother, in order to be able to use them as a surrogate mother, has to already be nursing, so she would have had to produce offspring. So that means that we're going to have to be breeding deer, and that
Right, you
doesn't
don't
work
want
out
to do
for us.
that.
No.
You don't want to do
That
that.
makes
But
the
in the
problem worse.
wild, some animals, like I think wolves, if the parents are killed,
Yeah.
others will come in and
Right,
take
can
care
come in
of
and
the
can take care of
babies.
them.
And I'm sure there's other social animals,
Speaking of-
elephants and
speaking of
things like
wolves.
that.
Yeah.
Speaking
you
of
like to see a
wolves, yeah,
wolf?
we have
Wolf, oh.
an amazing
better
animal we want
believe
to
it.
show you
Come on in,
here.
Donna.
Oh,
My goodness.
gosh. Look at this.
This is a big bad wolf.
Oh,
Yeah, it really looks it.
really. Hi. Can we bring her up on
Yeah,
the
you can sit her up
table?
here.
or-
She'll probably
Sure,
fly.
she
She'll
comes
have
up.
to
I
be?
don't know if she will.
Sure
or
you
not.
wanna
She
be on
knocks
the table?
everything
Come up, honey.
over,
Yeah,
that's
I
fine.
feel
We
to
can
see.
handle
How
it.
you doing,
This
sweetie?
girl
This is
is an
Lakota.
extraordinary.
Oh.
Isn't she
Lakota?
beautiful? Yes, she was named Lakota when we got her.
Get ready
She
for an
recently
accident.
came down
That's
from,
okay.
She's just a
a
baby.
rehab
Yeah.
center up in
That's a good
Seattle that
girl.
really wasn't very well suited for handling these guys. And we have 3
Wow. Did you
wolves,
want me to hold
adult
you-
wolves
you
at
got it
Wildlife
there?
Images.
Yeah, you hold
And
it, I'll
she
go
was,
play.
well, you're not making yourself very viewable to the public right now.
There we go.
So she is going to be our educational wolf. She'll be traveling out to school groups and greeting the guests there at Wildlife Images because she, of course, is imprinted. The difficulty with wolves is, of course, nobody really knows that this is a pure wolf. She may be
She might be part
40%, she may be 95%. Really, nobody knows because for so many years, people have been inbreeding them with domesticated dogs.
which is really not a good idea at all.
No, you tend to get the worst traits of both
both.
animals.
You
You
get
get
an
something that
animal-
looks like a dog and acts like a wolf. And very rarely do you get something that looks like a wolf, acts like a wolf, and you can call it really legitimately a wolf.
And wolves really, hybrids which are part wolf, part dog, and purebred wolves really make very bad pets.
They do.
I mean, they will chew your house apart.
Yes.
They will always
Oh, yeah.
mark and spray their urine,
as long as
their
we-
pee-pee on your house to claim it and own it. They won't come when you call them.
Exactly.
Really a dog. If
They'll
you
tend to
want-
eat your other pets. There's a few things that
your,
are
neighbor,
real.
your neighbors might plan
Yeah.
on that.
So they are definitely not a pet animal. And a lot of people look at them and think, oh, the mystique of the wild, and it's so macho to have something that I can call a wolf. It's a bad situation. I don't
And
recommend it
it's
to
really
anybody.
kind of a selfish thing to do.
It is, it is
It's
indeed.
not good for the animal.
But, you know, if
So-
you're interested in seeing, Lakota or some of the other baby animals that we've seen today, you can visit Wildlife Images. I mean,
Absolutely.
Wildlife Images is a place that's open to the public. So
That's
you
a
can
great
go
way to
and
find
great
out
way
about it.
to learn
Now-
more about these guys.
Cody and Alex, both at Glendy Hale Elementary, want to know how big a gray wolf will get. Much bigger than the gray fox, huh?
Yeah, oh yeah, a lot bigger. Nearly 100 pounds. A male could be in the 100-pound range. This is a female, so she'll probably be somewhat smaller. They are dimorphic, meaning the males and females are different sizes.
Well, they
And-
are.
Yeah, and so she'll probably be in the neighborhood of 75, 80 pounds maybe.
Now, you said she was imprinted. Tell us again
75.
what that means.
Imprinted really means that she thinks humans are just absolutely wonderful. And again, this is another animal that can sometimes have a switch. They can act like the friendliest, most human-oriented things in the world, but as they mature, they may lose that edge.
And she does howl.
And, yeah, she does
I
howl.
could hear her
does
even
howl.
just a little bit making some noise. Yeah, that you were talking about sometimes having a switch. Jennifer also at Glendy Hale asked, are gray wolves harmful to humans? If they're kept as a pet, they could be.
There's never been a recorded attack on a human being in North America, which I think is a really good
Right,
point.
so just that with them out in the
Never.
wild, they're going to
Yeah.
want to avoid people at all costs.
Oh,
aren't they?
absolutely.
If
And
they're a purebred
you
wolf.
know, we've made a great job of wiping them out everywhere except for a few states.
Yeah.
Yeah,
which
at
is
one
really
time they were wild and native to Oregon. And I think it was the 1930s, the last of the wolves were
believe so,
shot
yeah.
in the state. And it's a shame. People tend to look at big predatory animals as being these vicious beasts we have to wipe out. So the grizzly bears were wiped out in the 30s, the wolves were wiped out in the 30s. And in many cases, people are trying to get rid of the cougars and other animals the same way.
And actually, though, predators, I mean, obviously all animals have an important function in the food web, but having a predator around really makes the prey stronger, doesn't it?
does
Because-
Yes, they take the weak and the sick.
Well, yeah,
They'll
they
take the
feed on the
healthy
bottom of
animals.
the food chain, or they're grabbing,
Does that
you
come
know,
down?
the sick, and like, of course, in the weak or of the animals, like a
down,
deer,
buddy?
they'll drag down the slowest, the
I
oldest,
don't
the
know, it's
weakest.
kinda far.
And they're strengthening the gene pool that way. Well,
Because
humans
it leaves the strongest ones to have more babies.
reproduce, and now humans, when we go out and hunt deer, well, the people that do that, they do the exact opposite thing. They want one that looks really spectacular on the wall and has this great big set of horns. Those are the ones that should be out there breeding. They shouldn't be
Yeah.
the ones, you know, in a freezer somewhere. If you want to have a better, more healthy deer population in
Yeah,
the future.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
we're taking the wrong end of the gene
Miranda-
pool out.
Excuse me, Miranda at Lone Pine Elementary was wondering, will a wolf attack a human even if the human hasn't done anything? And we were just saying that they don't
There's never been a
attack-
recorded attack in North
Yeah,
America.
out
Never
in the
been a
out in the
recorded
wild,
attack.
they're not going to attack people
And
at
there's never
all.
been a death attributed to a cougar attack in Oregon either. And there's always that hysteria, though. You know, somebody someday probably will be attacked by a cougar, but it's not because the cougars are doing anything that bad. It's because we've eliminated so much of their food supply. We've moved into their backyards,
Right,
and we've set up a situation that's destined for disaster.
Now, if you do, though, if you are out walking and you happened upon a cougar, what should you do?
You want to look as big and mean and ferocious as you can.
So
You know,
just
big
kinda
stance.
stand
You know,
up?
Oh,
people
that's
that have
easy.
coats on, you can put your coat up above your head and make it look. Do not run away. Slowly walk away from the cat.
back
Things that are
away.
running trigger them. Smaller individuals are quite often the first thing they'll go after. You know,
Just
an
like they
animal
would
that,
in the wild.
Yeah, an animal that will not resist as much as a better prey every time. So, you know, leave your little buddy behind and run away.
I believe everybody.
See you, bud. I can
Hook
really
him
nothing
and
you
then
can.
run.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
So-
the best
Okay,
way
while
to
you're
do it.
doing some questions there, I think I'll take our wolf back.
Okay, we've got
Yes, I've got
a few more
another-
minutes, so we're okay. We're doing right on
Good,
time.
we'll get
here,
another
I
animal
think.
ready to
All
go.
right.
What was that
wonderful.
question that I had?
For those of you that just tuned in and you have some questions for us, you can go ahead and give us a call here at the studio. We'll try and answer your questions on the air.
try.
The number here is 6767, and if you're out of the Medford Ashland area, it's 1-800-558-1993.
All righty.
Give us some call.
Caitlin from Lone Pine Elementary would like to know, what kind of animal do you take care of most often?
Birds are the most common, the songbirds, things like that. The little screech owls come in very commonly. So the birds by far are the most common.
And then what of the mammals? What is it? Deer, maybe?
Yeah, fawns, raccoons.
Raccoons,
We may
oh,
get
yeah.
30 or 40 raccoons this year. So that could happen. So
Now, last time, speaking of taking care of mammals, last time you were here, you had a baby opossum, but now you're no longer allowed to take care of them,
good
right?
point. Yeah, the opossum is not a native to Oregon.
They've
It was
just
an introduced
moved in.
species. It never did occur west of the Rocky Mountains. So humans brought them west of the Rocky Mountains. They started populating this area, and unfortunately, like any non-native animal, they have a certain problem they cause in the environment. The opossums eat ground nesting bird eggs, pheasants, quail, a lot of our native birds are being devastated by opossums. So the state no longer allows people to rehabilitate the opossums and release them back out in the wild because of the damage they are doing.
To other animals.
Absolutely.
So generally, if you get one in, you would just have to euthanize it, put
Absolutely.
it to sleep
Right.
peacefully, which is, again, a service to the other wild animals, and it doesn't hurt the animal that you're putting to sleep.
Biologically, it's the most sound thing that can be done. It's something that we don't want to do, and it's not something we enjoy, but it's something that's really makes
Just
best
better
sense for the
in the
bigger
long
picture.
run for the whole. Now, what about starlings? Is that the same situation?
European
Well,
starlings.
Starlings.
they're looking at the starling. It is the same situation. They've been introduced, but their populations are so out of control, and being as they can fly, I mean, there's no natural
what's the
physical
point?
barrier other than ocean, so there really isn't much point. So we
That's a
can
shame, too,
send
because-
people home with their starlings, and they can raise them until they're, happy with doing it. So we don't spend a lot of our time rehabilitating them there. We'll usually send them home with the family because it's a waste of our resources and time.
Right.
Yeah.
And starlings, they've just taken over and
Absolutely.
outcompeted all kinds. And the thing is that we know exactly how starlings got into this country. There was a gentleman who released 15 of them, I think, in New York, because
right.
he believed that every bird that was mentioned in Shakespeare's plays should
English,
be
English house sparrows, starlings, and nightingales.
nightingales.
Nightingales
I
didn't
know
make
that.
it. It was a little
And
too
so he really did a horrible thing
He
to
did.
the native animals, because when you have an introduced animal, the ecosystem isn't prepared for it, and it doesn't have maybe any natural predators.
Never works.
and-
It never
Right.
works.
So,
Yes.
all righty. Brenna at Conger Elementary wants to know, does a hybrid, an animal that is half wolf and half dog, or part wolf and part dog, does it eat the same thing as a wolf?
Oh, absolutely. Our wolf, or wolves at Wildlife Images, eats primarily raw meat. We get a lot of venison from roadkill
Venison
deer.
is deer meat. yeah.
Right, and state police and Fish and Wildlife help us out and bring the venison, or we pick them up on the road. So ours get that. Now, a domestic dog would eat the same thing given that opportunity. So
Okay, so we
do you
just
ever
answered.
supplement with dog chow or any
to
other
some
types of-
degree we do, and vitamins and minerals and that sort of thing too. So it's
Yeah,
not
given-
strictly venison.
All right, so Tyra or Tira at Glendy Hale, that was your question. What does a gray wolf eat? So we just answered that. Jake at Griffin Creek wants to know, what is the biggest wolf you have had, or that you have now maybe, at Wildlife Images?
I think Czar's our biggest wolf, and he's probably, 110, 115
Yeah, he's
pounds,
really
something
tall.
like that. Yeah, he's
Very
kind of tall and lean. They're
They
not
have
really.
long legs.
Right.
and-
Long legs. And the further north you go towards the Arctic, the longer leg they get. I don't know why, but the wolves do get bigger.
And typically, wildlife closer to the Arctic Circle gets bigger too, because they have to have more body mass
More
to stay warm.
to stay
Thermoregulate, yeah.
Oh, that's good to know.
All righty.
Are you want to do another question, or are you ready for me
Let's
to?
do two more questions,
Okay.
and then we'll bring in our
Yes.
last
Sure.
animal. Pilar, I think it is, at Lone Pine wants to know, how many species of animals eat berries? Now, when I was studying up last night for the
Oh,
animals I thought you
boy.
were bringing, one thing that surprised me was it said foxes will sometimes
Yes.
eat
They will.
berries.
Love
I didn't
them.
know that.
So will coyotes and
I sometimes eat berries.
Bear.
It's funny, our
Johnny,
bears,
anything.
bears love
we are fortunately, we have 20 bears at Wildlife Images now, so our food supply for the
20
bears.
bears.
Yeah, we have the biggest bear population of any facility in North America that's not a zoo. So we have a huge
goodness.
bear population. But we will often get leftover produce from Fred Meyer, and they'll give us, expired fruits and vegetables, meats, things like that, bananas and all sorts of things. The one thing our
wonderful.
bears will not eat is strawberries for some reason.
You're kidding me.
You dump a bucket full of things out there, then some of it could be kind of icky looking, and they'll pick out and push the
They won't eat the
strawberries aside.
strawberries.
Won't touch them. Now, I don't know
Now,
what
see,
it is
I would
about
think
that.
that would be one of the first things they would go for.
That's what I would think.
First thing
Strawberries
I
are
would
yummy.
think.
maybe they're allergic to them
yeah.
and they know it.
That could be. That could be.
Who knows?
Oh,
That
they're
would be,
just-
maybe some of you
they're just
who are
wonderful.
going to be future biologists could try to find out why it is that bears will not eat strawberries. And speaking of, let's take this last question before we bring out another animal. The other question we got from Ms. Ayler's class at Central Point Elementary was, what other jobs are there working with animals, and what training do you need?
It really
good
depends on the
question.
direction you want to go. If you want to be a veterinarian and work with animals on that end, of course, college is the direction for you. You need to jump into the books and learn the math and all the stuff
So
that you
even
have
in
to
high
do.
school and junior high, you need to be really taking some math courses and focusing on your math and science?
Absolutely. The biology classes, all that sort of things are real critically important. And no matter what you want to do with wildlife anymore, if you want to work with State Fish and Wildlife or any of these areas, the forensics lab like we have in Ashland, they take advanced degrees. So it's important that you get your education and pay attention at school. It's really going to help you in the long run. Also, practical experience. If you can volunteer at a facility like ours or SeaWorld or any of those places, or get a job at a place like that for the summer, that's wonderful.
And so you take volunteers. How old do people have to be to volunteer?
Our volunteers are typically, we try to get 18-year-olds and over, but sometimes if in special cases we'll take younger volunteers if they show that they're mature and able to handle the situation.
All righty, well, we've got an animal that's commanding our
We
attention
have Donna
here.
and Mark here that are
Man.
Now, are they
large-
volunteers at
Maybe we can
Wild Life
volunteer
Images?
to handle
sweetie.
large mammal training.
See if we can get her up.
There we go. Can you?
So
there?
let's see if we
Oh,
can
yes.
get this animal up here. We don't want to make him or her nervous.
Yeah, she's a juvenile. She's probably about
She's a
about
juvenile.
5 months old.
So
I think Dave-
juvenile
Just
sort of like being a
incredible.
Yeah, she's
teenager
like 7 months, I
in
think,
the
by
animal,
now.
Right.
in the animal world, isn't it? And again, those of you
Do you want some
watching,
help
she's a
there, or-
wild animal, so
There you go.
she's not necessarily predictable.
Oh,
We
man.
can't get her to do just exactly what we want her to do because she's wild, and that's the way it should be. Oh, can you hear her growling through
Oh,
Sean's
her purring is
microphone, maybe?
incredible. Oh, yes. Yes, it's all right.
This is,
I don't
of
need
course,
that ear.
most people probably realize it's a cougar. And cougar is the largest of the felines in North America today. And they're one that's on the edge of controversy because of everybody moving into their habitat and then complaining about, well, I have a wild animal in my backyard. These sort of things will happen when you do move into the wild areas. Cougars are an important predator. Their numbers may, I think, be pretty substantial right now. At one time, of course, they had competition. They had wolves and they had bears, like grizzly bears to compete with, that also shared the same food supply, so
Yeah.
kept their numbers balanced. Now, with people and our people's interest in going out and hunting deer, the deer population is artificially inflated. When you have a large number of deer or predatory animals out there, you're going to have a larger number of predators, the cougars. So they're marvelous, marvelous animals, and they have a very
Boy,
important
she
role to
is-
play in nature.
Yes,
and
yes.
you can see she adapts pretty
She's
well to
pretty
this.
happy
She's
to
doing
have
really
that
good.
toy,
Very
isn't
playful
she?
today.
Yes,
You can
she's,
hear her really purring
She's
up a
good at
storm.
killing the stuffed animal seals here.
Yes.
Well, that's
I'm
one thing
amazed
that's
if you
important.
tell-
This cat came into a facility, a veterinarian's office up near Portland, and somebody had shot the mother with an arrow, killed the mother, and then the baby was found in the brush behind the mother. Didn't even have her eyes open. She was just a little tiny baby at the time. So they picked the cougar up, took her to a veterinarian's clinic.
sweetie.
The veterinarians wanted to save this cougar, and by law, we're not allowed to rehabilitate cougars. There's certain laws now by State Fish and
gosh.
Wildlife that won't let us rehabilitate them, and I think a lot of it is just due to the political pressure. And people are panicked about the idea, well, gosh, if we do take a cougar and release it back out in the wild, and it were to jump on somebody's chihuahua or to attack somebody down the road, is the state going to be tied up in a lawsuit for the next
Right.
20 years? So it's gotten to be such a litigation-happy society, a lot of these wild animals cannot be rehabilitated, put out in the wild again. So fortunately, the Oregon Zoo intervened, brought this cat in, protected her basically, kept her from being euthanized, and now the state and Oregon Zoo is letting us use her now as an educational ambassador.
Oh, okay, so
we're
she's
gonna
not going to
keeping her-
be released back into the
No,
wild.
she can't be released back out in the wild. That's
She's
a
obviously
certainty.
imprinted on
Well,
people.
She's lost her fear of people, Allison,
Right.
so that's a death sentence, putting her back out anyway.
Right, because she'd go right up to
Sure.
somebody in their yard saying, hey, feed
Yeah.
me, and they'd
Absolutely.
have
Have
to
to be
shoot her or
afraid.
whatever.
Yeah, can I play with your kitty?
Right. Play with your kitty. All right, Mrs. DeBoard or DeBaird's class at Allendale Elementary in Grants Pass wants to know, is it possible to volunteer for work at Wildlife Images in the summer? Now, you said usually
Absolutely.
people have to be 18.
What
but-
are the
No,
age-
I will take 15 and up.
Okay, so if you're getting to be 15 years old, get on that website.
15-year-old has to be very mature, but I'm sure most of your watchers today are mature 15-year-olds.
And Danielle at Peterson Elementary asked, is it fun taking care of the animals? It's probably good to point out that it can be, but it's not always.
It's such hard work and such long hours that the reason that people do it is we just have a passion for animals.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
We
So,
love,
I mean-
we love to be around wild animals.
So you
That's why we
may be,
do it.
you have to be, if you're going to work with animals, you have to be okay with scoop and poop.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
Even the
scrubbing
director does that
things-
occasionally.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
scrubbing things down and stuff like that, but the rewards, if you're an animal lover, are very great.
It never goes away. It's the same intensity and the same love for the animals every day. And you have to have that deep down interest in it. That's like a burning passion. If you do, that's a career for you.
If you're looking to get rich, this is not the career for
Right, right. Neither is education. I'm
That's
sure
right.
the
It's
teachers out
comfortable
there will-
living, but you're not going to get
It
It's
offers
the-
really
certain rewards, though.
It's the TV people who get rich.
Yeah, they're rich, that's right. Oh, gosh, it's just wonderful.
Bethany at Glendy Hale wants to know, how tall does a cougar get?
Oh,
That's a
probably.
pretty big one already.
Well, she's only about half grown. She'll be about 100, well, 80 pounds probably.
She's gonna be a big
And I'd
female.
say she's 26, 28 inches at the shoulder.
Wow.
I do
Now-
know there was one shot this past year, a male that was 140 pounds.
Whoa.
So the males can get very, very big.
No, yeah, I
And
saw
that's
a
a
large
long
one
tail,
over
too.
on the coast. There was a wildlife place. That was one of the largest ones I'd ever seen. Was over.
Well, they're
there.
really a small cat compared to tigers that'll go 400 or 500 pounds.
But don't they
Other
use their
cats.
tail too in balancing a little bit as they're running maybe
Absolutely.
and jumping?
Yeah, that
When they're
tail
climbing
is
and-
so thick. Yeah.
Jessica
Ah.
at Conger wants to know, what do you do when a rabbit is eating your pet's food? Or some other wild animal maybe you have coming into your yard and eating your animal food?
I know.
What,
All
Corey?
right,
Bring
yeah,
your
let's
pet
hear
food
it.
in at night.
Yes.
Oh,
Real
bring it
easy.
at night.
Bring your pet food in at
Ah,
night.
that
And you
makes
can
sense.
get your cats in at night too, so they're not predated by, killed by a great horned owl or a coyote. But if you leave pet food out,
They're gonna
some
come and
people
get it.
will argue with us on this point. Well, little Fuzzy likes to eat nibble at midnight.
Well, they're not going to starve.
You're going to
not gonna
invite
starve,
every
yeah,
wild
yeah,
animal to
okay.
your porch, so that is an absolute
You gonna
must
jump
to
up on
be
the
safe.
table?
Well, and also if you're having trouble maybe with raccoons and stuff, animals getting in your garbage can, I know if you can just put some bungee cords over there sometimes,
Absolutely.
that's the best thing. Well, we're
Sure.
about out of time, and I sure appreciate all the calls we've gotten
Oh,
here
yes,
from
it's been
Peterson and Glendy Hale and Allendale and Lone Pine that we haven't even gotten to, and we apologize for that. But again, we encourage you to get out there and learn more on your own. Get on the web, go to the library, get yourself some good field guides and books that you can use to learn more about animals. And if you're really an animal lover and you're committed to it, find yourself a way to volunteer. And if we have a chance to put up the web address for Wildlife Images on the screen here, it's just www.wildlifeimages.org.
Exactly
And
right.
we would encourage you to visit their website and also to go up and visit them in Grants Pass
yeah.
and take a tour of them. Thank you guys so much for being here today.
Yes, that was
Corey and
wonderful.
Dave and Mark
Oh,
and Donna
really
and all the
appreciate you
wonderful
coming in.
animals we've had. Stephen at Griffin Creek was wondering how old is a cougar, and didn't we say
She's about 7 months right now.
7 months.
Yes.
So let's see if we have any other. Gabby at
Yes.
Glendy Hale wanted to know, can cougars be trained? Now, you were trying to
They-
sort of
they can
control her
train.
a little bit, but
You can train them. They're a very difficult animal to train, and every individual is different. It's sort of like,
Yeah.
can you be trained?
Yeah.
Sometimes,
I don't think
certain things, yeah,
I'm completely
give it up,
untrainable.
hopeless.
but it's very difficult and very specialized, and we only train them to perform natural behavior, something they do out in the wild.
Right, right. So
You know,
you know,
I have a question. What is the most difficult animal to rehabilitate at wildlife, like that you get in? Like one that's
There's several that are different.
I guess the thing you could say is probably the length of time that's taken to rehabilitate them probably makes one more difficult than the other. And the bear cubs take us about 18 months to rehabilitate.
All right,
So
we're
we
about
have
out
them
of
longer than
time.
most.
Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time on
Yes.
Animal Track. Allie.